Hey everyone, it's Jackie from Energy Before Matter Life Coaching, and I'm really excited tonight to be talking to Tay, the relationship and intimacy coach. Hey Tay, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No problem.
I'm really excited to be talking about this because I know a lot of us have been uh, holding a lot of baggage and not sure how to move forward, and especially in finding the right one. And
hmm
I'm really excited to chat with you tonight about it.
I am too. I'm very excited.
So, do you mind telling me a little bit about yourself and your story and a little bit how you got your business started?
Of course. It all starts a long time ago. Um, I was about 5 years old when I was first molested, and that I didn't realize how that affected me until I got about 14. And the cat was already out of the bag at this time, about 7 years. And I freaked out in the middle of class because I was left in a room full of boys. I was left in a room full of boys and my teacher, who was a man, and I flipped out and had an anxiety attack and had to leave the room because he closed the door and wouldn't open it even after I asked him. So I became very uncomfortable. And I asked him several times. And then when I actually broke down and started crying and left the room, he couldn't understand why I hadn't told him. And it was not something that I could easily tell men that, I was 14. It wasn't something that easily came to me to tell a man, oh, this happened to me. So we fast forward to college and I got into relationships, and the relationships were very interesting because I became the manipulator. And what that did was it made our relationships very kind of on the topsy-turvy side, because it was my way or the highway, or, there really was no relationship. So when I met my husband, I decided to kind of do a change around. And I was like, all right, we're not going to do this manipulating thing anymore. We're not going to do this, it's my way or the highway thing anymore. We're going to go ahead and actually have a real relationship. So I basically told him all of my flaws, and he accepted me full-heartedly. But of course, not without him telling me his flaws. And I accepted those as they were. And then shortly thereafter, I became a pure romance consultant where I got to teach women about sex and intimacy. And soon, within a couple of years, I decided, hey, this is really what I want to do. I really want to be a relationship and intimacy coach, because where I was to where I am now is so different. And there are still women out there who are younger, who are older than me, who are still going through that same thing. And I wanted to give them somewhere where they could go to be able to share that information, release those emotional, physical, and sexual abuse traumas, and be able to actually live and attract their perfect partner.
No, that's an incredible story, and I completely relate to it, especially when you said how it wasn't easy for you to talk to men. For me, I was sexually molested as a child and abused later on in relationships, and a lot of it was because of patterns that I hadn't realized were there. I always went into relationships not really looking for the connection, but just assuming that I could make it work and that they would be the one that I needed, and trying to look outside of myself rather than seeing the patterns that were repeating in my life. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, it wasn't just men that I couldn't speak to. I didn't feel comfortable speaking to anybody about it. So, I was 9 through 12 when it happened. And I
Okay.
remember I finally opened up at 16 when something happened to my sister. And, I remember my sister saying, "Why didn't you say anything?" And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "I don't know." And it was something I held on for a long time. And then finally, when I started to really work through those patterns and work through the trauma, I realized I didn't have anyone to speak to about it. So
Mm-hmm.
of course I didn't feel comfortable speaking not only to men, but to anybody about it.
Exactly.
And I still remember the first time I felt comfortable speaking about it was with somebody else who had actually suffered trauma that was similar to mine. And we both could relate. And from there, I remember I still had it really far pushed down. And so for me, the point of healing came when it was kind of forcibly out. I remember being 22, sitting in a lecture for my teaching degree, and the question was, or not the question, but there was a slide that showed things to look for when in kids with sexual abuse, and I had
Mm-hmm.
all of them. And I remember going, oh my God, and I just started crying, and it was hysterical, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I remember leaving and thinking, what's wrong with me? And
Mm-hmm.
that was the beginning of everything. And I remember everything I pushed down came out. Like I started feeling, seeing, hearing. I could just, oh, it was incredible, the sensations that I had pushed down for years. And
Yeah.
so I guess my question to you is, what was the moment that you knew you were ready to heal from the trauma?
I'm sorry, you broke up there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. What was the moment that you knew you were ready to heal from the trauma?
So I don't know. I can't say really, like, I can't really pinpoint a specific time, because I think for me, when you're, like you said, when you're going through it and you have no one to talk to and you're trying to figure things out, it really is hard to decide, okay, when do I want to change this? And I can say it happened to me for 2 years, from 5 to 7. So I can say that at 7, I had 3 younger sisters. So by protecting them from this, letting it happen to me per se, um, when I was 7 is when I really was like, okay, there's something wrong with this. And I told my sister, and she told my mom, and we went through this whole rigmarole about it. Then going throughout the years, I had a boyfriend I think I was 14 when I had a boyfriend as well. And, young love. And
Mhm.
when he told me that, I told him, he came over to my house and we were making out, and he went to grab my boob, and I freaked out. And it was because I didn't give him permission to touch me. And he was like, what's going on? And I told him that, what had happened to me. And he was like, oh, well, that's just an obstacle. And I couldn't believe, like, what the heck he was saying to me. Like, what do you mean it's an obstacle? Like, do you even know what the heck I just said to you? And I think for me, like, I really didn't want to heal until I realized that it was affecting my desire to have sex, and it was affecting my sex life. And I had to be, I want to say maybe like 23, 24. And then at like 26, I found a way to do that.
Mm.
And it really did change my life. Like, it really did change my perspective on the whole thing. Just, it really did.
No, that's incredible, the shift. And even if it wasn't a pinpointed moment, you can still see the journey through it. And so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just like one moment, but it was from A to B, the progress between the two. And I really love the word permission. For me, it was the complete opposite. Permission was different. I remember the patterns I saw afterwards. My first boyfriend as well, he was fantastic. I can't even say anything bad about him. But afterwards, I dated a man, and I remember uh, he was asking me to do something I really didn't want to do. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember him just asking and asking. I kept saying no and no. And I remember finally saying, okay, fine. And I remember looking at him before he did it, and he didn't even look like him. He looked like somebody different.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, and I cried the entire time. I bawled hysterically. Didn't change a freaking thing until he
Mm-hmm.
finished. And then he started crying. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? It's okay. It's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
I gave him the power to think it was okay. And my relationships continued after this as well, in that, not all of them, but the majority of them, where something was like that, where something would happen that I knew crossed my lines. I did not give them permission. I just caved because I didn't feel I had the right or power to be strong enough to say no and continue saying no.
Exactly.
And yeah, if I had given permission, if I had felt the permission was in a different way, maybe things would have turned out. But yeah, for me, it was, I remember the patterns just kept continuing, perpetuating themselves, if that makes sense. And, you know, you say you didn't want to heal until you were ready. It's so true. I remember I say this, I speak to people, and I always hear people, and even my mom, you know, she sort of found out when I was 16 when it first came out. And I just said, I'm not ready. I don't want to talk about it. And I totally shut down. And I see, when I was a teacher, I see students like this, and you can't force it.
Right.
You can be there and you can be supportive, but I really struggled when people pushed me out of it because I wasn't ready. Because a lot of the times you push it so far within yourself that you're not able to heal, because you actually have to let it come through. And if we just continue pushing it aside, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
And so that moment I was ready to heal was in that transition where that I was sitting in a lecture hall, and then I was practicing yoga and doing all these different things and feeling I was ready. I didn't want to hold on to this. And of course, I think, you know, it's not a one-time thing. It's probably I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, it was, you know, you get triggers, but you work through them, and you're able to work through them a bit faster than that first initial wham, bam explosion.
Exactly.
So I guess, why is it important to work through these issues in order to find the relationship we really deserve? It seems obvious, but maybe we need to explain it a little bit further.
And no, I definitely understand. And, you know, it is an obvious thing, but it's one of those things that once you've been through that emotional, physical, or sexual abuse trauma, that you really don't think of it as something that really needs to happen. So for me, my change was, one of the biggest barriers that I had was, you know, actually not wanting to control the person I was with, because that's really what it was about. For me, it was about control, because I could not control what he had done to me for those 2 years. I felt like I had lost all of the power that I had. So in order to get that back, I felt like any man who came into my life, I had to control and basically tell him what he could and could not do. But at the same time, he could not do the same to me. Like, he couldn't tell me what I could do. He didn't have that power, because it was my life. I controlled everything. So what I did was, the first thing I had to do was relinquish control. And that was the hardest thing that I had to do. Like, I was like, so I'm a perfectionist, I'm OCD. Like, you know, it was one of these things where I was just like, no, I can't do it. But after my last relationship, and being in a relationship where I was docile, I lost myself completely. I mean, I was a person I'm rebellious, super spontaneous. Like, nobody can tell me anything. Even if you tell me it's a mistake, I'll probably do it. Unless it causes harm, I will believe that. But if you're like, man, that was the worst experience ever, I'm like, well, guess I got to go try it, you know, just to see for myself, you know. And even if it's a bad one, I don't care. I'm just like, yes, let's do it. But when I was in this relationship with my ex, it was like, I changed everything for him. I became, you know, less spontaneous. I started not going out as much. We started doing in-home parties instead of going out to the club. And, you know, all the things that I like to do, I stopped doing. And I didn't realize how much it had changed me until I got to a point in my relationship where I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to go do other things now. I want to go have sex with other people. And at that time I was, you know, out there, I was talking to women and, you know, doing different things with them and, you know, just exploring my life. And I was in this relationship and I started to feel really bad about it. So I went to him and I said, listen, I said, I love you dearly. And we've been in this relationship for almost 3 years. I said, but I want to have sex with other people. And he immediately got mad. We had never had an argument in the 3 years that we were together. I know that sounds weird, but we never argued. I later found out it's because we didn't talk. Because I just let the relationship happen. I was just like, oh, yes, I'm part of this thing. So, it was whatever. But as soon as I started opening up about my feelings and my wants and my needs and all of this, it was just crazy from then on. So at that point I was just a couple months went by and I was just like, you know what? I'm good. I knew I didn't want the relationship anymore, but I did take some time to think about it. And when I came back after those 4 days, I was just like, yeah, we're done. And it felt so good, but I knew that I wanted to be married. I didn't want kids. Let's not get that twisted. All right. Because it's not first come love, then comes marriage, then a baby carriage. It's not none of that. Okay. I knew that I wanted to be married. I wanted somebody to share my life with, to share my spontaneity, my crazy, corny self with. And I seriously was like, okay, well then I guess we have to relinquish control. So when I met up with my husband, we were friends before. We had known each other for about 10 or so years by that time. By the time I met him, probably like 6 years. I think we known each other for 6 years then. And we got back together and we started talking. And I was like, he at the time he now was looking for someone. And I was just like, okay, well, let's see if this works. And he told me his crap. I told him my crap. And, it was really a decision. It was really like, okay, let's see if this can work, because now I'm open with you. But there's still some things that I held back. Like you said, even being in this relationship, there was a lot that I still couldn't talk about. Yes, I'm open about what happened to me. And yes, I'm open about, when it happened and things like that, but I wasn't open about the details. And that was the part that really, it didn't really become a problem. But every time my husband, before we got married, before he would ask me about it, like I would shut down and instantly start an argument, because it was like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't understand why you need to know about that. I don't understand why this is so important. Like, I just don't understand. So we put it off on talking about it for a very long time. And, right now, like I'm just now getting to that point where I'm opening up about it now. I mean, he even mentioned something about it probably a couple of weeks ago. Like, you never want to talk about, what happened to you when you were a kid. And I said, but you haven't asked me recently. And that's when I knew that I was ready. That's when I knew that our relationship was going to be taken into a different direction. And it really is about being open and honest. And if you can't talk about it, if he can understand that, or she, or, whoever you decide to date can actually understand that you're not ready yet, then that you found that person. Because if they're willing to wait for that information, someone who, is willing to give that time into you and able to help you go through that, then you're ready.
No, that's a really important thing, is to be ready.
Yeah.
As we were discussing earlier. And I remember one of my exes that when this started happening, I said to him, I remember all of my relationships in the past, not all, sorry, the majority didn't end well. And it's mostly because I didn't have the boundaries or strength or courage to end them. And I remember one of them saying to me, I said, I'm seeing all of these things coming up. I am ready to deal with them. I remember saying, I am ready to deal with them. But I don't think I want you here while I work on them. Because I knew they were part of that pattern. They were part of that problem. And he really struggled with that. And it didn't end well. But at the same time, I remember, I met my ex-husband, and he was a decent guy, you know, he wasn't a bad man and he would have done anything for me, but I still hadn't entirely worked through those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it was partly because they all tied somehow with one another.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I realized, you know what, I had been traveling around the world for 8 years now, and I've been thinking, I can't find where I want to stay. I can't find home.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I remember sitting while doing yoga in Beijing going, what if it's not where I am, but who I'm with? And I remember as soon as I ended things and as soon as we finished, I felt lighter and I felt as if I can start to work through these things. And now I feel so much more prepared and ready to meet somebody that I really do want in my life versus just trying to make it work. Because my past
Right.
patterns were just being with somebody to make it work. And it wasn't right. Like almost all of the men I dated in the past, the first date I went, yeah, it's okay. And then like somehow I'd be in a relationship with them because it was the same thing. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
no communication. It was just, it was what it was. And I just took
Right.
it for what it was instead of saying, you know what? I deserve better than this. I don't have a good feeling about this. Or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, he's not, you know, he's nice, but he's not the right one. And so for me, it was really important to work through these things because I'm seeing now what I want. And like you said about mistakes, oh
Yeah.
man, I am totally one of those. I jump in, I make mistakes because it's how I learn,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and sometimes they're not always mistakes. It's always, there's always something to learn. And
Exactly.
I love Brené Brown's quote about regrets. It's, you know, we can't, she says we can't have regrets because something like, because we have to learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for me, it's not a regret if we're learning from them. But if we don't learn from them, of course it's a regret. We really
Right.
need to think about what our lessons were. And so I don't regret anything that's happened in the past, but I know I've needed to work through it. And the hardest part, I think, and I don't know, maybe you can answer this from your end, the hardest part for me was to go inside of myself to work through it. As soon as we work through, if I'm trying to fix everything outside, it does not matter at all.
Right.
The first thing I needed to do was work on me on the inside and what happened to me in that trauma.
Right.
Anything, you know, what happened with me as a child doesn't matter on his end. It matters on my end.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really work through that and and forgive and work through the triggers so that I can get to the relationship that I really want.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the same way it happened for me. I knew that there was something that I needed to do. And quite often I get those, you get to a point where you're overwhelmed and your brain is going a million miles a minute. Like, your brain normally does that anyway, but this is like triple speed. All right. And I had one of those days in August of last year. And I really attribute this to why I started, why I was like, okay, I'm ready to discuss it. I'm ready to let it go. So I was at work and I was having there was so much going on. I needed to do this. I needed to do that. I was being pulled in every direction. And I was like, all right, this is just crap. What am I supposed to do? How can I get all of this stuff out of my brain? And then I remembered that there's a technique that I actually use within my program called journaling. And it's more of a free write journaling. And a lot of people actually talk about this and use this as a method to get rid of all the chatter that's going on in the brain. So what I did was I was at work and I was just like, man, I really need to write this down. I need to write a whole bunch. And I was just like, and I was like, all right, fine. I'll do it when I get home. So end of the day comes, I drive home and I'm thinking about all this stuff and work and, play and things. And it was nuts. I was just like thinking about everything. And I was like, all right. So I get home and I'm like, babe, I need an hour. And I said, I have to get this stuff off my mind. I don't know what to do with it. And I said, I just need to let it go. And he's like, all right, cool. So I walk upstairs, I come into my office, I close my door, and I set a timer for 45 minutes. 45 minutes. And I go and I look around and I grab a journal and I go and I write 2 words in it. And I go, today was. And I was like, you know what? All of a sudden my hand just like, my body got tired and limp. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to write as fast as my brain is thinking right now. So I opened up a Word document. I put the date and I go, today was. And all of a sudden I basically start writing out the immediate things that were on my brain at that moment. Oh, I'm stressing out about the fact that I'm quitting my job. I'm stressing out about the fact that I'm not making enough money with my business. I'm stressing out about this. I'm stressing about that. This is bothering me. I can't believe this. And about 2 pages in, all of a sudden, all of the way down deep, all of the stuff that I just buried down deep started to come out. And it was about my molestation, and it was about how I can't understand why he did this to me, and what was he thinking? I was only 5. How could he be attracted to that? I don't understand. And then all of a sudden it was, I don't feel like I can have kids because what if I do this to them? And, my mom told me that she, that thought may have crossed her mind before she had us. And, because she was molested as a kid, and all of this stuff just started coming up. And I was like, holy crap. And then right before, like, as tears are streaming down my face, I get to page 7 and I'm like, I feel tainted from this experience. He has tainted me because now I know what the real world is like. I sometimes have these thoughts that are not my own and have been created from this. And no, I would never, ever do any of these things. These things don't make me feel good. They make me want to kill him. But that is what that feeling is. I feel tainted. And by this time, my alarm had way went off. And I just kept writing because I needed to get it out. And by the time I got finished and I was, the tears are streaming down my face, my husband came in, and he came in to check on me because at this time it was like an hour and a half. And he came in to check on me and he put his hands on my shoulder, and I could just feel his caring, his nurturing ability. And I was just like, I need that right now. And I told him, I said, I need a hug. And he hugged me and I bawled into his arms, and it was uncontrollable. I could not stop. And then I was like, afterwards, I like breathed in and I breathed out this long breath. And from that point, I could feel all of that energy, all of that negativity, all of that pain gone. And that is literally when I knew, like, okay, now I can talk about it. Now, if he wants to know anything about it, I can talk to him about it. Because it was now gone. It's written down on paper. Like, I still have the journal entry because it's a reminder to me, free writing really is a method that works. And I could not understand like why I didn't do it before. But it was really one of those things where I released all of that and I was just like, holy moly.
No.
And I was like, it was almost like being reborn. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I think I'm ready to talk about it. I think I'm ready to help other women with this. I think I'm ready. And yeah, that's basically when I was just like, yep, we're opening up about this. We're going to tear off those scabs are now, healed. I got the fresh skin there. I'm touching it and I'm like, all right, we got this. It's good.
No, I love what you're saying. That's a really beautiful story. And the journaling, that technique is so wonderful. I use it as well. And same thing, around the same time, I was free writing. And it wasn't just free writing. For me, it was also, I would do walking meditations. And I remember I was in the middle of the woods somewhere and I would just scream and cry and let it out and ask why did you have to do this to me? Why couldn't it be anybody else? Why would you want to do this to me? What made me different? Why?
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of whys.
Yeah.
And I find even now, by writing, by putting it out there, it's so freeing, and it allows us to acknowledge it's there, and not only acknowledge that it doesn't even have to be about molestation or abuse. It could be anything. It's putting it down on paper. It's putting it out there. And as soon as you put it out there, it's almost like yes, I see you're there. And then you choose. It's a path. Which path are you going to choose? And for me, it was always, I don't want to follow that path. And like you, I was terrified of having children, that something of having similar issues, or not being ready because of the past that holds on to me, and bringing that down on my own kids. It was a really hard thing to work through. And I think nowadays, especially with society, we expect this instant gratification. We expect things to be quickly. We don't expect to work for it. And something like this, like I've been working through for 10 years now, and it's so much better than it was. But of course there are triggers that happen, and the triggers that happen, I can work through faster, especially with techniques like writing, meditation, just walking and moving my energy around. But at first it's such an overwhelming feeling, and by writing, it's such a great way to put it down without getting freaky on everybody else. Like instead of freaking out, that was my tendency, to freak out as the people closest to me. But if I wrote, it was down on paper, and I didn't have to, the paper never backlashed at me. It never judged me for what I was about to say. It didn't turn around and say, well, you're wrong for doing this, or why didn't you do that? It just responded by listening, by whatever I put down on the paper.
Exactly.
So I guess the last question I have for you is, with everything that's happened, and, healing from the trauma that you've been through, I guess for everybody else as well to know is, how is sensuality, or sexuality even, how is it important to our being? How is it important for our relationships? Because I know a lot of people out there, especially friends or whomever who've been married for years, they lose that connection and that sensuality with their partners. How is that so important to not only our relationships, but to ourselves?
So we'll look at within the whole realm of relationship and intimacy. Some people see sex and intimacy as the same thing. A lot of people don't separate the two. They don't realize that these words are not interchangeable. And within a relationship, you can have both. You can have one or the other. And in order for a relationship to work, there has to be a connection between the two beings, between the man and the woman, the woman and the woman, the man and the man, whomever it is. There has to be a connection. And what intimacy does is it draws us into our sensuality. It draws us into that connection and brings us together as a unit. And when that happens, you can feel, you can see through the other person. And it's a unique experience that I've really never experienced until I got with my husband, which is probably really strange, but at the same time, not really. And because of that fact, because of that connection and that change in energies, you begin to realize that relationships, more so intimate relationships, aren't always just about sex. Now, sexuality in itself is a beautiful thing. With all different cultures, it's different across the board. In America, it's something that we don't talk about. It's something that we, we're like, why are we even saying this? Why are we speaking this? In other cultures, I think I've seen a YouTube video or a BuzzFeed video about how they were teaching kids in Sweden, I think, at a very young age about sex and sexual organs and things of that nature. And, you know, some people let their kids run around naked. Others are like, oh my gosh, cover the baby. you know, even now with the whole breastfeeding fiasco, it's, years ago when I was a kid, like I thought it was normal. My mom breastfed my little sister, I was 8. So, she breastfed my baby sister. And it never was an issue for me. And now here we are, 2018, and everybody's up in arms like, oh, her tits out. And it's like, no, get it together. Like, seriously, your mom used to breastfeed you in public. I don't know if you knew that, but it really is such a diverse conversation and topic that when you get people of different religions, different cultures, different backgrounds to come in and actually talk about it, it may be a taboo subject, but it's so important for those two people to connect with those energies, to connect with their sexuality, with their sensuality, to be able to understand one another. And it's not only through sex that you realize that this person is right for you. It's through that intimate bond, that intimate connection with that person's energies that you realize, yes, this is the person that I've been looking for. This is the person I've been searching for. And most people don't look at that because they think, energies are all, oh, it's woo woo, it's magic. It's, what is this love at first sight thing? But it really is. It's the connection. And it really is all around us. But when you think about a relationship, any relationship, a friendship, a mother and daughter relationship, a grandmother and grandchild relationship, a niece and nephew relationship, it really is the exchange of energy. And, kids do it best. They can tell when someone's energy is off. They can tell when that is not a good energy for me. And they are not shy about it because they're very in that. But as adults, we kind of lose that connection with our energetic state. And so we start to stop listening to our gut feeling. We start listening to our intuition. And sometimes, with any type of trauma, it can get screwed up. And then we start thinking like, oh man, is this the right decision? Is my gut really telling me the right thing? Because it steered us wrong that first time. And it was such a major trauma in my life. Is it going to steer me in the right direction now? And just by taking those little things and, understanding your connectivity to the universe and to other people around you, you can really start to attract that potential person that's going to be with you. Maybe they're not there for a long time. Maybe they're just there for you to exchange that power and then have that for them and then go about your way. But a lot of times, like you said, sometimes we're scared to be out of that because we're like, well, we want a person, we need a person. And it really isn't about that. It's about, let's understand where we're coming from first with our energies and then see how that reflects or how that interacts with another. It's like putting two magnets together.
Yeah.
If you put them together in the wrong direction, they are not going to go.
Yeah.
But if you put them together just right, click, right together. And that really is, what we have to be aware of is we have to be aware of those energies that connect us all. Because that right energy, as long as you're in the right mind frame, will come to you and it will hit you like a ton of bricks. And you'll be like, holy crap.
No, I completely agree.
This is it. And trust me, it doesn't happen overnight. I've been in a lot of relationships and it does not happen overnight. I mean, me and my husband, we've known each other now for, I want to say it's 2018. So about 12 years. We were just partnered. We were just, friends with benefits in college when we met. And over time, our relationship started to form a friendship. And I would have never thought in a million years, you could have asked me 6 years ago, like, oh, do you think that this guy would be the one that you're with? Like, oh, no. He has a kid. He's a frat boy. He, just the different excuses that I made up for why I didn't want to be with him. Yeah. And coming back and realizing that our energies at that moment were intertwined, that really was an awakening.
Mm.
And I mean, I couldn't be happier with where I'm at now. I couldn't even, you can ask anyone. I've had opportunities to leave this relationship multiple times, but something kept drawing me back.
Yeah.
And because I listened to that inner voice, that inner connection, it was like, okay, this is where you're supposed to be.
No,
This is it.
I love it. I think it's so important what you speak about connection. It's one thing that I really value in looking for a partner is connection. And especially nowadays, where my past has shown me that I didn't respect that and didn't look for that. So yeah, I love everything you say, and there's really nothing to add to that. So I guess I want to just thank you so much for taking the time today to spend with me and everybody listening, talking about everything, literally everything. And it was really a beautiful experience. So thank you so much.
No problem. I mean, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, because it's very often that I share my story with people who don't want to listen. But it's not very often that I find people who are willing to, understand what I do and understand, why relationships are important, not necessarily just, the ones where we're trying to find our soulmate, but the ones where we're, that we're already in.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Well, if anyone's listening, I am going to put Tay's information in this call so that you can get in contact with her if you want some further information. Thank you so much again. And hopefully we'll be able to connect soon for everybody to listen up.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.